Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan and welcome to Words in Time. Now in today's video, I'm going to be ranking 20 of my favorite or perhaps least favorite sci-fi characters. Let's get into it. Up first, we have Jim Holden from The Expanse. Now, I like Jim, I root for Jim, but I think what I like more than Holden as an individual character is the crew dynamics of the Rocinante. As my friend Treebeard would say, Holden is a bit of an honorable idiot, and I like him and I think he serves a purpose, but he's not necessarily the thing that I am enjoying most while reading the Expanse series. Although, I just finished book 5, Nemesis Games, and I'm starting to get quite invested in these characters. So, pretty solid character, I'm going to put him in B tier. Up next, we have Mark Watney from The Martian. Now, this is a first-person story, and we spend a lot of time with Mark Watney because this is a survival story on Mars, and I don't think the story would work without him being a great character. I absolutely love this book, in part due to how it makes science and math actually fun and integral to the narrative. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, but I also liked Mark Watney as a person. I thought he was very funny. I was definitely rooting for him. I was invested in him. Definitely a solid character. That's why I'm going to put him in A tier. Moving on, we have Hadrian Marlowe from Sun Eater. Now, similar to The Martian, this is a first-person story. We spend a lot of time with Hadrian, and the time we spend with Hadrian actually spans over a very long period of time. And I really love the growth that we get to see in Hadrian, from young, impulsive, kind of immature Hadrian to a very old, wise, he's seen a lot of stuff, older Hadrian. So I'm very invested in him. 4 books into the series, can't wait to see what happens next. Just absolutely one of my favorite current series, one of my favorite all-time characters, Hadrian Marlowe, S tier. Up next, we have Mahit Dismare from Teixcalaan. Now, I really enjoyed Mahit in the first book, A Memory Called Empire, and I thought I knew her pretty well. And then the layers that were kind of revealed, the things that I didn't perhaps expect, but perhaps should have realized, I found to be really informative, really engaging. I thought this character was really well written across the duology. Great dialogue, great relationships. Really like this character. I'm gonna have to put Mahit into A tier. Next up, we have Rob Broadhead from Gateway. Now, Rob is a very interesting character that we get to learn about through the main storyline, but also through therapy sessions. So we really get to dig into the mind of Rob, but unfortunately, I didn't love what I saw. I thought he was an interesting, complex, well-written, well-realized character, but there were some things he did and said that just really lost me. I kind of gave up on my emotional journey with Rob. Yeah, sorry Rob, you're gonna have to go ahead without me. I'm leaving you behind in C tier. Alright, our next character is the Shrike from the Hyperion Cantos. Now, I love all of the 4 covers from the Hyperion Cantos, and the Shrike is featured on all of them, and it's easy to see why. Shrike is physically imposing, scary, terrifying, mysterious, and I loved learning more about the Shrike, seeing what the Shrike could do. I found it exciting, thrilling. It was just, it could have been schlocky, it could have been kind of cheesy, horror-esque type writing for the Shrike, but yeah, absolutely one of the most brilliant characters. Can't say too much without spoiling it. All you need to know is S tier. Up next, we have Cyanite from The Broken Earth. Now, she is a very interesting character, perhaps a little bit tough to connect with at first, kind of break through that surface layer, but once I started to make sense of them a little bit, I definitely empathized with them and I was definitely intrigued by them, but they could also be a bit frustrating and I'm not sure I ever fully connected with their journey. So, an interesting, well-written character, but for me, I'm gonna have to say B tier. Moving on, we have Charlie Gordon from Flowers for Algernon, and we really get to learn a lot about Charlie as we read his journal entries as he undergoes an experimental surgery to improve his very low IQ. And we really get to see a lot of changes in Charlie, both in his actions, his thoughts, but also in the way he writes, his spelling, vocabulary, grammar, and this is such an emotional journey. I was incredibly invested in Charlie, and this is a really impactful arc, and the ending just left me absolutely floored, all because I cared so much about Charlie. For those reasons, I'm putting Charlie Gordon S tier. Our next character is the Mule from The Foundation. Now, personally, I didn't like books 2 and 3 quite as much as the first book in the original trilogy, but the standout for me in the sequels was the Mule. We had this great character that kind of threw a wrench into Harry Seldon's plans using psychohistory, and the way that played out I thought was very interesting, seeing their motivations, seeing the Mule's abilities. I think there was some nice reveals. A very layered character, and Isaac Asimov, perhaps not the strongest character writer, but of the characters that he did write, at least in that series, the Mule was definitely my favorite. So the Mule for me, A tier. Next up, we have Darrow from Red Rising. Now, this is another first-person POV story, so we get to spend a lot of time with Darrow, and a pretty large amount of that time he's experiencing the emotion of rage. And while Darrow is very angry, perhaps justifiably, there are more layers to him than that, and he's a very smart character, although perhaps not always as smart as he needs to be. I very much enjoyed following Darrow on his journey, or at least through the first 3 books, which I've read so far. So for those reasons, I'm going to put Darrow into A tier. Next, we have Gurgay from The Player of Games. Now, Gurgay is a master of games, whether it's board games, card games, he is the player of them. And while I believed he was brilliant at these games, I'm not sure I fully felt that he was all that brilliant overall. Outside of the games, he was a little passive, maybe a little too indifferent, lacked a little bit of emotion. There was something that was missing that I couldn't quite connect to him on. So while I enjoyed the story and I thought Gurgay was a good character for the story that it was trying to tell, not one of my favorites. So for me, B tier. Up next, we have Ender Wiggin from Ender Saga. Now, Ender's Game in particular, I think is absolutely fantastic, and I think pretty much all the characters are pretty well fleshed out and realized, but Ender Wiggin I really connected to, and I really went on a journey with him. I thought it was really well done the way he was written as a genius child, a brilliant child, because writing super intelligent characters is not something that's easy to do, especially children, without it seeming a bit cheesy or too easy, but I really felt like Ender Wiggin was this thoughtful, smart child, and he really felt things emotionally. He was put in tough situations, and you really felt the weight on Ender Wiggin's shoulders, which is why I think this book is such a success, such a classic, in part due to Ender Wiggin. That's right, he's going up the top, S tier. Our next character is Henry Dorset Case from Neuromancer. Now, Case is a cowboy, and he kind of has a cool description to him, but Neuromancer, there's so much going on, it's a little bit hard to pass out with all the terminology, the technology. I found it a little bit hard to make sense of the book and a little bit hard to connect to the character. I did enjoy it, and this is one that I enjoy thinking about and reading about, perhaps more reading itself, and I think would benefit on a reread. So perhaps I'll connect more with Case next time, but for now, I'm going to put him in B tier. Up next, we have David Bowman from 2001: A Space Odyssey. So Arthur C. Clarke is one of my favorite writers, and I love 2001: A Space Odyssey. I gave it a 9 out of 10 on the channel, but I have to say, David Bowman, there's not too much memorable about him. I think HAL 9000, a robot AI computer thingamajiggy in the spaceship, had way more personality than David Bowman. I think the story succeeds without David Bowman, arguably the main character, having a lot of personality, because the story and the ideas, the concepts are also interesting and with that kind of jaw-dropping ending. But I think perhaps this could have been a 10 out of 10 book for me if I was a little bit more interested in, intrigued by, invested in David Bowman. So love the book, but sorry Dave, C tier. Next, we have Portia from Children of Time. Now, I didn't think I would say this going into the book, but I like the spiders more than the humans. That's not the case in the real world, but while reading Children of Time, I really enjoyed learning about the spiders and their society, their structure, the power dynamics, the relationships between Portia, Fabian, Bianca, and I really liked Portia. I think she was a well-developed character, and I think seeing her progress through time was a really interesting journey. I think the overall pieces were perhaps better than Portia as an individual, but I still really liked her and think she was a strong character. Spider character made it all the way to A tier. Up next, we have Billy Pilgrim from Slaughterhouse 5. So Billy is kind of based on Kurt Vonnegut's own experiences in World War II, but Billy comes unstuck in time, and he goes on a really interesting journey that tackles some pretty heavy themes. I absolutely love this book. I think it is an absolutely stunning achievement by Kurt Vonnegut, and I really cared about Billy the entire way. Although, while thinking about this book, I think perhaps the themes, the concept, some of the sci-fi ideas are a little bit stronger than the character itself. I do still really like Billy. So for those reasons, I'm putting Billy in A tier. Let's keep it moving with Bob Johansson from Bobiverse. Now, Bob is a little bit of a similar character to Mark Watney, and if you like dad jokes, you're probably gonna like Bob. And I won't give anything away, but the way the story plays out, we do get to see many different aspects of Bob, which I found to be rather interesting. Although I will say Bob started to grate on me a little bit as the book progressed. So I like Bob, solid character, but for me, I'm gonna put him in B tier. All right, I'm cheating a little bit with this one, but we have Campion and Purslane from House of Suns. So why have I combined these two? Well, they are clones, or as they are known in the book, Shatterlings. So I really liked these characters. The chapters alternate between the two, and they are very similar, but I appreciated the little differences. This book is absolutely chock full of mind-blowing sci-fi concepts. Absolutely captured my imagination, but it also captured my emotions because of my investment in the characters, in particular Campion and Purslane. So for those reasons, these two Shatterlings are A tier. With our penultimate character, we have Doro from Wild Seed. Now, Doro is an absolutely infuriating character. He has a particular worldview. I don't like it. I hate this guy. I want to see this guy get his comeuppance. And there are characters, villains if you will, or anti-heroes, different types of characters that you hate, but you love to hate them. It's kind of enjoyable. It's part of the fun of the story. Unfortunately, Doro, I just hated them. I hate this character. I hate thinking about him. I hated reading him. Doro, you're in C tier. And finally, we have Alex from A Clockwork Orange. Now, Alex is another terrible person. Alex is not a character you're necessarily supposed to like, but I did find him fascinating. I thought he was a very original and unique character. His language, the way he spoke, the nicknames for things, his perspective on things, no matter how warped or twisted or terrible they were, I always wanted to learn why he thought the things that he did, or he did the things that he did, or what he was going to do next. So it's a pretty controversial book, and I see why. It's definitely not for everybody, but I think Alex, a very unique character indeed. I don't like you, but you're S tier. So there you go, guys. Let me know what you think of these 20 characters, and let me know if there are any other characters in sci-fi that you'd like me to talk about in another video. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and you can find more sci-fi content over here.